Hello, everyone. Thank you for your time today. My name is Colt McAnlis. Today we're going to talk about the next 5 billion gamers. And I got to tell you, this is really an important topic for me because I love video games. Does anyone else love video games? Like it's part of who you are. Yeah, round of applause. Thank you. And when I mean I love video games, I don't mean I go home and I just play video games. No, I mean video games molded me as a human being, right? So you got to understand, I grew up in the deserts of Las Vegas, Nevada. One guy, nice. Now, while Vegas is a nice place to visit, it's a really crummy place to grow up. Because as a kid, there's really nothing to do except dig holes in the dirt, catch lizards, and really figure out creative things to do with sunburn. Like, that's it, right? For me, video games were what I did. They were who I was. They taught me things. They educated me, right? They let me see how to solve problems, and that my princess was always in another castle. This is me at age 12. And I put this up here, first off, to show that I did have hair at one point in my life. But more importantly, because this is actually the most influential picture I have throughout my entire life. This is actually the exact moment. I had just completed Super Metroid on the Super Nintendo. There's my handy Nintendo Power that helped me through it. This is the exact moment that I decided that I was going to make video games for the rest of my life. It was right there. Right there. We caught it on camera. The spark happened. I said, video games matter so much to me that this is all I want to do. And since then, I've been losing my hair slowly, but we've been doing that. Now, as I've grown up with video games since that date, video games has grown up as well, right? So a lot of us, when we started, a lot of here in my age group, sorry, right? You started out with the early consoles and arcades. Anyone remember putting the quarter on the arcade? Like, I got next dibs. Round of applause, come on. We can't see your hands on the stream. Yeah. I remember I almost got into a fight in an arcade one time because a dude wasn't honoring the quarter code. And I'm like, I am next for Killer Instinct. He's like, no, you're not, whatever. Anyhow, early consoles and arcades kind of defined us as a culture with video games, right? And from then, we actually kind of branched out to PC gaming and modern consoles. You know, we saw the rise of the Super Nintendo and sort of the adoption in the American culture. And from there, things really got interesting when we started seeing the adoption in the early 2000s with browser gaming, social gaming, and of course, the boom of mobile gaming. And really, that's where we are right now. When you look at the history of gaming, you actually see these crests and peaks and trends and fashions, and it just keeps and keeps going. And where we are today is mobile gaming is a very, very mature market. It's an extremely mature ecosystem. And working at Google, working on games at Google, the #1 question I get from people is, what's the next big thing? What should we be doing? The ecosystem is very mature, it's very saturated, there's lots of competition, a lot of great content out there, but a lot of people are wondering what's next. And there's a lot of great opportunity out there, right? We've seen cloud gaming become a thing, right? Neural gaming, right? You know, the little headsets that you think about the color green and all of a sudden you can cast Expelliarmus on somebody. VR headsets, has anyone actually checked out Cardboard upstairs? Yeah, round of applause. And the question is, these all have opportunity to really redefine how humans interact with gaming. But I gotta tell you something, that when you add them all together, they still don't equal the potential of what's gonna happen in the next decade with the next 5 billion gamers. They don't even come close when you look at it from this perspective. You see, in 2014, we reached about 7 billion humans on the planet. Can I get a round of applause for procreation? Yeah? You have no long how long I've been waiting to get a round of applause for humans breeding. Yeah. We hit 7 billion humans on the planet in 2014. By all estimates, about 2 billion of those are connected to the internet, which leaves roughly about 5 billion who do not have internet connectivity. Now, if you look at the trends of connectivity, the way the industries are moving, the way the funding is working, the way that the towers are being built, the way devices are being rolled out, everyone pretty much has the same estimate, which is that within the next 10 years, that 5 billion humans are going to become connected to the internet. In 10 years, 2025, we're going to get the majority of humanity coming online. Think about that for a second. It roughly took us about 40 years to get 2 billion humans online. And in 10 years, we're going to get the next 5 billion. We're talking about Harlem Shake to a whole new level, right? And of course, this has massive implications for gaming. Because when you talk about who the next 5 billion are, you have to look at all the statistics and realize where they're coming from. If you actually take the majority of Japan and United States and look at their connectivity saturation, we're pretty much already saturated. If 100% of these countries came online, we're not even going to put a drop in the bucket of the next 5 billion humans. We are highly saturated with respect to connectivity. However, if you look at the lowly saturated countries, like China and India, you realize that when you take population plus connectivity, see that, the rise in that graph? You realize that these low saturation areas are where the next 5 billion connected human beings are going to be coming from. And to put this in a little bit more perspective, let's look at the number of mobile subscriptions to date, right now. So that previous slide showed China at roughly about 45% connectivity. That represents 1.1 billion connections on mobile devices. In India, 12% saturation represents 900 million connections, and it's going up. To put this in perspective of Western game developers, everyone in the room right now who's trying to make it big in these markets, the entire population in the United States is 317 million. If you had every single human being in the United States download your game right now, you still would not equal a third of 12% of the potential of these new markets. That's the next 5 billion. And the cool thing is that they're not going to go through the same thing we did, right? Like, we all grew up with these crummy laptops that basically gave us, like, face cancer or something, right? Like, anyone remember, like, your face getting hot when you were programming for too long, right? Nobody? That was just me? OK, that's probably why I'm bald, you know. But we had this trend where you go for some of the clunky desktops, the more powerful ones, everyone's on laptops now. No, these next 5 billion human beings are going to be able to leapfrog that entire process and actually jump right to mobile. Mobile is cheap. Mobile is powerful. The amount of power in a single mobile device rivals what we had in the early 2000s. Right? And it's just going to get better. It's going to get cheaper. Everyone saw in the keynote yesterday the amazing applications or the amazing devices that are coming out at really low cost that are going to allow these next 5 billion human beings to come online and get access to your gaming content. But of course, this brings in problems for Western game developers that we don't even yet understand. Here's the big one. In India, about 20% of those individuals speak English. How many Western game developers in here actually speak more than one language? Round of applause. Round of applause. No, I can't see your hands. OK. So good. Mainland China, only 0.83%. Now, if you look at the collection in the majority of game developers in the Western market, they all come from America, these guys don't speak English, right? When I see an application show up in my store that isn't in a language I recognize, I'm automatically skeptical of it. These individuals are going to be acting the same way. Now, let's look at this. Of the 5 billion humans that are connecting, we need to consider who they are, because that basically defines their spending habits. That defines like how they're going to interact with the games in the environment that we're creating. So in the USA, you have to consider that if we're 88% saturated, it's roughly the 88 upper percentage of wealthiest individuals who have internet connectivity. These are the individuals who have the ability to afford the devices and afford the internet connection in such a leadership way that it doesn't put too much strain on their day-to-day operations, right? Japan, upper 75%. China, upper 45%. India, upper 12%. What this means for everyone in the audience is your users, the next 5 billion human beings who are going to be coming on looking for your game, are not going to be coming from the upper wealthiest echelons. They're going to be coming from the lowest. This means that you're going to have to reconsider how you define your purchasing, your marketing, your monetization strategies, because these people will not be the ones who have 100% ability to do in-app purchases all the time. This is a great graph of connectivity throughout the world. You can kind of see, the darker regions, the lighter regions. Of course, this is in a conservative or an inclusive map because I couldn't get the resolution. But you need to also consider that the next 5 billion users are not going to be coming on from the areas that are already massively connected. They're going to be coming from the regions that are not yet connected. Because again, if you look at that previous slide, when we talk about wealth and distribution and where these people are, they're not going to be in the major metropolitan cities. They're going to be right outside of that. Right? When you look at the cost distribution of where you can actually afford to live, and it's going to slowly expand out. Your users are going to be in areas that are developing connectivity. And this is kind of good and kind of bad, but the problem is we don't know what kind of connectivity we'll have. Most people consider that when you start in an urban environment, you should really have the best connectivity, right? There's the most economic funding there. You're able to build the biggest cell towers. And then as you move towards more sparsely dense areas, you get sort of a worse connection at first, and then over time they build it up. But a lot of countries are actually leapfrogging this process. Their established infrastructure in metropolitan areas actually keep them from advancing connectivity to a point that they can actually get 4G and beyond networks, right? So if it's too populated, or there's too many buildings, or there's too much ancient architecture, they can't actually build the cell towers there. In retrospect, or in conflict with that, because there's so much opportunity to build these cell towers out in the emerging areas, we can actually get 4G and 5G connectivity. So this means that the 5 billion people who are coming from the lower economic areas have better connectivity than the people getting paid the most money living in metropolitan areas, which is a little weird. The takeaway from this is that you have no idea what the connectivity of these individuals is going to be. Half of them could be sitting in an inner-city suburbanite with 2G connectivity because they can't get anything better, basically having to hop from Wi-Fi spot to Wi-Fi spot to get anything done. Or they may be out in the rural areas with a full 4G connectivity, but a device that can't run anything more than calculator. So with all this in mind, you're game developers, right? Round of applause if you're a game developer. All right, just so I know what not to say next, round of applause if you're from press. OK, good. We can talk about cool stuff then. No. So let's talk about what you guys need to do. So with all this in your mind, hopefully you're getting a picture of who the next 5 billion are and what this means for you as a game developer. Let's talk about what you have to do to actually influence this market and be competitive in this environment. So the first off is localization matters, period. There's no debate to this. You have no wiggle room to discuss localization. You can't, this is all that matters. You have to understand that the movement between language as a communication, as the human brain understands the world and perceives the things around it, is based in our fundamental knowledge and teaching of language. How many people in here actually bought like JRPGs for the Dreamcast and like spent the first 30 hours trying to figure out what the game actually was about because you couldn't read any of the Japanese? Anybody? Round of applause? It was just me. Right? Imagine that for the next 5 billion gamers. They're not going to put up with it, right? They expect stuff in their local language. They're going to want to experience your content in their local language so they can feel more immersed with it, have a deeper connection with it. This is such an important problem that Google actually knows that this is a huge problem. We actually have a website dedicated to entire resources for internationalization. Visit this URL here. We've got like 20 different tools and products and layouts to help you figure out how to localize your content better. In fact, one of my favorite ones is a pseudo-localization tool. You can actually run your application through this, and it'll change your fonts and actually show you where your UI fails with different languages. Right? So I know it's a little hard to see on the big screen, but you can see some of the icons start getting clipped. You can see things become unreadable over time. At least bare minimum, actually seeing how your app and your UI looks when you put it in Mandarin versus English, it changes the way you actually approach the game and how your UI should be laid out. And in fact, this is so important that on Google Play, we have a very simple 3-step process. We have a button. You just click the button, and we'll do half of the work for you. Right? You click this, you fill out a couple things, and boom. Your game will get translated. That's how important localization is for the next 5 billion people. We don't want you to just make a game. We want you to make a global game. We want you to make an impactful game. We want you to make a game that changes people's lives at a global level. But this has absolutely nothing to do with the larger concern here, which is that localization is not equal to culturalization. Can anyone tell me what's wrong with this picture? Take a second and look at it. I know we were all partying last night. That's all right. Violent, perhaps. The problem is that the majority of these are actually Anglo-Saxon based. Dragons, kings, princesses, knights, honor, swords, round tables, chivalry. These are themes and lore that we, in the Anglo-Saxon descendants in Western America and Europe, we grew up on this. We know who King Arthur is. He's part of our lineage. He's part of our stories that we tell ourselves, right? But individuals growing up in China and in India have no idea who the hell King Arthur is. They grew up with a different lore, a different way to describe themselves and represent themselves in society. Where we grew up with Lancelot, they grew up with Romance of the Three Kingdoms. These types of environments actually allow us to connect with the content at a very important level, right? Here's a great case study. There's a game called Ski Safari, who a while ago actually put out this information. Mildly successful in English-speaking countries in Europe and America, and they wanted to actually enter the Chinese market. And so they actually put their game out pretty much as is, with minor localization. The game really didn't do any well. I mean, we're talking maybe 1% to 2% average conversion over a 6-week period. They decided to throw the long ball and go for complete culturalization. They touched everything. What had previously looked like northern peaks in in Switzerland, they actually changed it all to look like a winter in the Chinese hills. The result was staggering, a 60x increase in monetization. The reason was because the individuals felt compelled and connected to the content. It felt like the stories they knew, the environment that they were familiar with, right? While we all know, knights storming a castle and pouring tar on people, like that's not represented in these other cultures. Culturalization of your content is more important than just simply localizing it. Of course, this brings us to the next thing, which is that you actually need to monetize everybody, everything, all parts of all processes, right? And the reason for this is that how these countries, the purchasing habits is vastly different, right? In China, you have to understand that there is a boom right now. There's a surge of credit card companies. Credit cards are the big competing market in China right now. There is more people that can issue you a credit card than there are companies to sell you a cell phone, right? This is a big industry right now in China. And as you can see, if you look at the trends, it's actually growing. About 23% of all individuals in China have a credit card right now. Take this in contrast to India, where it's only about 1.8%. Now, their industry is growing, but it's not necessarily at that same rate. As the next 5 billion humans come online in the next 10 years, they're not going to be doing it the same way because the infrastructure isn't keeping up, right? It means a lot of these individuals who are coming online are not going to be able to have that direct in-app purchasability, which means you as a developer need to understand that and start figuring out how to monetize these 900 million users who may not be purchasing with credit cards, right? Let's go back to look at the income versus connectivity versus population. This effectively means that the wealthiest individuals in an area who are connected and are gaming are going to be the ones who are most likely to do in-app purchases because they have the ability and access to credit cards. Everybody else, most likely, is going to be best monetized with ads. Look at that for India. The majority of the ability for you to monetize your Indian audience is actually going to come from advertisements, not necessarily in-app purchases. These are individuals who we've already seen in studies are more willing to watch a 5-minute YouTube clip advertising something than actually enter credit card numbers to buy a temporary power-up. Now, a lot of game developers would immediately just discount this entire market for that because you've built yourselves up to be an in-app purchasing environment because that's how most Western markets work. But that shouldn't be your strategy, right? Typically, this is the way that game developers are working right now. We have some build of our application, we upload it to the cloud, and it goes out to a device. And what happens on that device stays on that device. And if we want to do A/B testing or something else, we basically have to reissue our packages. But that can't work that way with the next 5 billion human beings. You see, we need the ability to upload an APK or a game and have it actually change and modify and basically respond to the individual in the environment that's actually monetizing to it in a way that doesn't put too much strain on us as game developers. We don't want to build like 90 different versions of our game. Like, who's got time? Ain't nobody got time for that. Right? That was my one meme. You guys got one meme out of me today. Right? Basically, this is how you want something to work, right? So your APK is out in the wild, it's out with a phone, right? And you upload some changes to your settings, right? You upload a new German pack or some monetization settings to see whether or not individuals will click the blue button more to buy the red boots and how that is different between like Germany versus India versus Mongolia, right? And you want some application to boot up and actually say, hey, I am in Mongolia, please give me the Mongolia-specific data, and it comes down. This is a really big process to build and to do. Well, the good news is Google's already thought of that. We have something called Google Tag Manager. Round of applause if you've heard of this before. Nice. Now, of those people, round of applause if you're using it. All right. That was, for you on the camera back there, that was roughly about like a 10% to 2% drop right there. Google Tag Manager is a technology that effectively allows you, it's a client-side tech and a cloud tech that basically allows you to say, hey, I'm going to upload a bunch of different name value settings and pairs and data files that represent different builds and configurations of my game depending on these parameters. And as phones basically boot up and provide their statistics to the cloud-based resource, they will get specifically the name value pairs and the information that you've provided for it. And the cool thing is you can keep doing this on a daily basis, and the user never has to re-download the APK. They just get your JSON setting files, well, hypercompressed JSON setting files. This is really nice, right? Because this effectively means if you do your game the right way, you can put settings in there that allow you to monetize people differently without drastically having to change your build, right? A SKU in China can actually start offering people more in-app purchases if you notice that their ability to view ads has actually diminished, versus in India, you can actually start them with ads as a primary viewing mechanism, and then over time, if you see that their behavior starts changing to in-app purchases, you can modify the entire behavior of your app with Google Tag Manager without having to reissue the APK. Because again, we're talking about connectivity, we're talking about lower echelons of economic ladders here. Maybe these people don't have the money to actually pay for bits to get down on the wire. So A/B testing gets really difficult. This actually brings me to a really touchy subject. So I don't know if you guys have seen my videos on compressor head. Compressor head, round of applause if you've seen compressor head. Like that's like 4 people. OK, everybody go watch compressor head. It's a bald man rambling about compression algorithms. So here's my second meme for the day. Your apps are too big, and you should feel bad about that. Period. Everyone in here, if you're making a game right now, your game is too big, and you should feel bad in your heart about what you're doing. Here's why. I wanted to figure out what the hell was going on in the gaming ecosystem on Google Play. I wanted to figure out why our games were so long and why they took so long to download. So I actually downloaded a large majority of them and started doing analysis on our games. What I found out was that the top free game was roughly about 34 megs in size. Right? The top paid game, 125 megs. That's huge for a mobile game, right? The limit is high. People are using extension packs. There's a lot of content there. Let's put this in perspective. If you're running on a 1G or 2G connection, that's about 3 minutes to download a free game. Right? So a lot of the free developers nowadays, they pay a lot of money for user acquisition to click on an ad, to go to the page, to then download their application to hope to get a conversion. And they're adding 3 minutes into the middle of that pipeline for the user just to get your bits. You can see a sudden drop-off when how many people in here have done that? When you're like, oh, I'm going to download this game. And then like you forget about it, and like 5 days later, you're like, when the hell did I install this game? Yes, round of applause, please, please. Everyone developing game, look around. Those are your constituents. These are the people who are having this problem. And for 125 megs, that's a 10-minute download. Who's got time for 10 minutes? This is the 2000s, man. Come on. I gotta give a talk and then go walk around with cardboard strapped on my face. So I decided to dig in a little bit more because I was a little bit upset about this, and I wanted to figure out where the bloat was actually coming from. So I opened up all of these APKs and did analysis, and what I saw was actually really embarrassing and striking to me. What I saw here, as you can see, this is a breakdown of content, and the #1 contributor to size was actually image data, by a majority of factor. Right? We're looking at easily, roughly about 50% of all APKs is just image data. If you dig in a little bit deeper with this, you can actually see that it's majorly a PNG files. 75% of all the image data is PNG files. Now, for those of you who don't understand PNG as a technology, PNG is an image format that's only lossless, right? Which means that it's not actually reducing any of the procedural or the perceptive bits of information to actually get larger compression. Other formats like JPEG and GIF or GIF, depending on what side of the fence you're on that one, GPU formats actually take into account lossy versions of this. They'll effectively reduce the amount of color space that the human eye can discern in order to take advantage of compression, and that's why those file formats are so small. PNG does no such thing, which means the best you can absolutely hope for is maybe 50%? 60% if you're lucky. But if you got a full black image, maybe you can get down lower than that. PNG is not what you should be using. These are devices in your pockets with powerful GPUs. And if you notice up there, the GPU, that's the blue mark, the GPU is actually one of the smallest used in there. GPU textures are really what you should be using. This is what I hope to see, which was the majority was GPU and the minority was PNG. And here's why. GPU textures compress smaller than PNGs, which means that not only is your distribution size going to be smaller, but your GPU residency size is going to be smaller. That's something you have to understand about PNG and JPEG and GIF formats, is while they transmit small during your distribution, they have to be inflated to full 32 bits per pixel when they're resident on your GPU. If a user has 1 or 2 games open and they're all conflicting for space using 32-bit fully inflated textures, that's a lot. Think of it this way. A 10K by 10K texture atlas at 32 bits per pixel is 4 megs. Right? For 520 or 256 meg devices that are strapped to your face or to your wrist, that's a lot of residency. Let's put this in a much different perspective, okay? So let's take this little 256 by 256 image of a parrot face. Everyone likes parrots? Cool. The PNG size for this on disk, this is the distribution size, 107K. The GPU memory, so the inflated version, is 192K. I want to put this in contrast with the GPU formats, right? So DXT1, PVR, and ETC. You can easily see that their disk size is equal to their GPU residency size. But here's the striking part. If you add all 3 of these together, it's only 80K. So if you were to actually take your PNG file and compress it in DXT, PVR, and ETC and ship that instead of the PNG file, it still would be 50% smaller in GPU residency and 20% smaller in disk distribution. Please use GPU formatted textures. If you do nothing else from this talk besides this rambling guy was talking about people in India and China, walk away from this knowing that the first thing you need to do is investigate how to get GPU formatted textures into your pipeline, because individuals in these areas are going to be downloading your content with restricted devices, with smaller bandwidth, with higher connectivity costs. And this is going to be the main thing that's going to give you the ability to breach that. So here's the deal. We don't know what's next, right? I can stand up here, I can predict it, I'm wrong, no matter what. No matter what I say is the next big thing. I can say it's a device, I can say it's grass blowing in the wind, or some robotic butterfly that can make you coffee. It doesn't matter. The next big thing is unknown. It could be a new bird-based game where you're throwing birds at other birds. I don't even know. Like, every bird game seems to be a big thing, right? It could be a new technology that people strap to their faces or give them a better understanding of the environment at hand. We don't know what the next big technology or the next big fad is, but we know that in the next 10 years, 5 billion human beings are going to be coming online, and they are going to be gamers, because that is what we do as a human species. We play games. It's something that has changed my life and the lives of many of the people in this room. And you have to understand that when these 5 billion humans come online for the first time and they get that device in their hand and they play that first game, it is going to change their lives. Just like it did some bald kid growing up in the Las Vegas desert. Your job as game developers is to make sure that that game that changes their lives is yours. My name is Colt McAnlis. Thank you for your time. Go build something great. Thank you.